So anyway, thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Transfero for the opportunity to be here. Before we get started, please make sure to scan that QR code up there. And then that will fill a little form, and then you'll be able to claim your swag afterwards. So a little special swag pack from Transfero. So just make sure to do that. And so to get started here, I see we have a guy wearing a Drex shirt right here. So this guy came prepared. Nicely done. Round of applause. So Drex is one of these things that I think it's a bit mysterious, right? We've heard a lot about it. It's gotten a lot of publicity in the last year, 2 years. The Central Bank of Brazil has been talking about a lot. Roberto Campos Neto, it's kind of his legacy, you could say, is to create this, moving the Brazilian financial system to a kind of a tokenized smart contract environment involving a central bank digital currency. And all this is called Drex. And there's a lot of layers to understand this, but it's a very significant project for a variety of reasons, which we'll dive into. But just to introduce our panelists here quick, we've got Rafael Castaneda, who is the founder of Casta Crypto, and he is definitely one of the most probably, I don't know, do you identify as like an influencer? I don't know how you, like, you're a YouTuber, both an educator, content creator, but sometimes you're not like a beauty makeup person. You're like a,
Yes, quite not your typical influencer. Quite not that.
So, and then we have Leandro Pereira, who is the tech lead at Nuclea, and he's also the author of a 3-part series blog post called Drex for Gringos, which is, we stole the name for this panel from your post. It was pretty catchy. And Leandro does a really fantastic job of like really outlining from top to bottom, like what is this project and what are all the different layers of it. And it's really kind of a masterpiece. So really well done. So anyway, so just to kick off, Casta, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction of just kind of who you are and what you're working on, and then Leandro will kick it over to you for a quick introduction as well.
Okay, sure, guys. Nice evening. Pleasure to be here, to have you guys. For my history, I am a guy that graduated in computer science. I have a master's thesis in software engineering, distributed computing. I was for 20 years a researcher and a professor in computational science. And then I always joke with everyone that as my hair started to fall, so did my patience. And I got fed up with the world, fed up with Web 2, fed up with everything, and I wanted to change career, to found something new. Eventually, I found crypto, and then I made like a great pivot in my life. I was a public servant, 15 years of career. I dropped my career and went full-time on crypto. Now I have a YouTube channel. I am a blockchain consultant. I do speaks and talks and like talk about crypto. And my lenses is that crypto is not something to buy and sell and make money. Crypto is a new technology that has the potential to change society as we know it.
Go ahead, Leandro.
So, hi, guys. If you wonder if it's really me, it's because blockchain is brutal. It's terrible. But it's, I'm Leandro. I work for Nuclea. Nuclea is a clearing house in Brazil. It's like work for the banks, basically. And we've been building like some tokenization initiatives there, some market networks. We're deeply involved in this movement of tokenization that everybody talks about. So tokenization is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about, but only few people are really doing it. So we're really doing it. And so that's it. And I had like the great idea of writing like a 3-part Drex for Gringos, which is in my LinkedIn and Medium. And if you go to Brazil Crypto Report, you will find it. Because I noticed that a lot of people were actually curious about Drex, not from Brazil. And most of them had like a wrong idea about what was being done here, like those basic things, like Drex is not a coin. Drex is the platform, So the digital real is the coin, the token. And you have like the tokenized deposit. So you have multiple parts in this project that sometimes are not like given, the right attention and the details and create some sort of like confusion in the market at the end of the day. Some even wrong expectations about what is actually being done and happening there. But that's it.
Yeah, so I think, the reason we wanted to do this panel was just to kind of amplify what Leandro is saying. Drex is a combination of a lot of things that in and of themselves are like quite difficult to understand. And then once you kind of package them together, they become even like more difficult to understand. But Casta and Leandro are going to help us simplify these things. So Leandro, why don't you just kick us off by giving us like the Reader's Digest, like 60-second version of like what it is that Drex is trying to do here. Like what is the objective and like what is maybe the basic framework here?
So the idea is actually to build an infrastructure, okay, to use actually tokenized assets in the blockchain and the traditional financial system, close this loop of like settlement, of digital assets. And basically it's being tested with 17, I think. It's banks and consortiums. So multiple, players in the industry are actually running through these tests. So they start with some transfer, some deposit tests, then they move it into privacy. That's where it's now, they're testing some privacy solutions, which is actually, I think, the key part of, the whole project to build this CBDC, this a digital currency, like central bank controlled digital currency. And this actually connects directly with the tokenized economy that it's being built in parallel, so that's an important thing. You cannot mix things here, okay? You have the Drex, which is, I see as like the last mile, to connect all the traditional financial system in a DVP, a format, in a better settlement solution at the end of the day. And you have the tokenization, movement, where you have already like many companies, even like Transfero, acting and producing, products, services, stable coins and all this. And this will get together at some point, So the idea is actually that all one day it's actually find, each other's path. So basically we are in a pilot phase, okay? It's a pilot, please, So stop saying that you're going to sell Drex as a service to people because this doesn't exist. It cannot be done. So stop giving attention to this guy saying that. And
that was my new startup idea.
Yeah,
but, I guess not.
Focus on the real problem, like to the solution for this. So, but it's basically that, there are many projects like this around the world. If you see, CBDC projects. But like if you compare Brazil with like others around, we're really like ahead of the game, Like I think the main point of the Drex here, it's the involvement, the participation of the whole industry. We really have the key players there, the people really connected to the pilot, but you have an ecosystem being created, being formed around that. It's very positive for us, independently if it like happens this year, next year, in 2 years, it's pushing, it helps to push the market forward.
And then Casta, I would love your kind of maybe 60-second answer about like, okay, when somebody asks you what is Drex, how do you explain this? And then what do you find as a technologist, like what do you find most compelling about what they're building here, perhaps vis-a-vis maybe what other countries are doing or other models that they could have employed to maybe achieve the same end result?
Okay, let's go. Just to record, nowadays we have more than 90% of the global GDP, all the central banks doing research on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Perhaps you guys don't know about that, but that's the number we have. So almost every central bank is thinking about CBDCs. But if you talk about central bank digital currency, the fact is that digital currencies are not a consequence of crypto. They predate crypto. You don't need crypto to have digital money. And in fact, most of our money nowadays is digital. When you say like, oh my God, the Fed is printing $400 billion. They are not actually printing money. They are just clicking on a mouse on some screens and then minting, yes. And then, oh my God, we have $400 billion. So we don't even have like enough, how do you say, notes? Printed notes to represent all the money that exists in the world. So we already have digital currency. We have Pix in Brazil. Everyone can get their cell phone, scan a QR code, and transfer money. So what is exactly new when we talk about crypto and CBDC? And for me, the deal is what we have today that we call digitized money is we are digitalizing an analogical infrastructure. So we are getting the money as we know it, and we are transferring our confidence in this money, first from gold, then from notes, and now from numbers on a computer. So we are working with an analogical and fairly old foundation. And when we talk about crypto and CBDC and this next frontier that comes from something like Drex, is that we are not analogical first and then digitized. We are digital first. So money is purely digital. It is more than just digital transfers. It is programmable. And that's where our central bank differs from lots of other projects around the world. Because we already have Pix. We have other countries that are like, well, can we use crypto to make a Pix work? But we already have Pix here. So what we are researching is that if our foundation, the foundation of the economic platform of the country is digital first and purely digital and 100% programmable, what can we achieve? And one of the first experiments in the Drex pilot is to tokenize bonds, government bonds, that here we call Tesouro Direto, which is like the North American bonds or the Fed bonds. That is the spine of the column. It's where we define the tax rate. It's how we measure the inflow and outflow of money from the economic pool in the market. So we are really advanced in our intentions, but it is important to note what he just said, that it is still a pilot, and there are, as we are going to talk, I think further along, several challenges, not only for our government, but for any government that is researching CBDCs.
And we've touched a bit on the pilot. I think, Leandro, you touched a bit on the pilot. Maybe talk a bit. I mean, Nuclea is one of the participants in one of the consortia. There's 16 or 17 different consortia involved in this, among which Nuclea is one. Maybe talk a bit about just like what have we learned from the pilot thus far. It's been going on for, if I'm not mistaken, about a year now, or coming up on a year. A lot of this was kind of the nuts and bolts of just getting people on, getting nodes up and running and onboarding folks onto the network. But what have been maybe the big learnings and like, what have been the successes, maybe the challenges?
Look, I will speak from my side, okay? I think the biggest learning now is actually to understand how we're going to scale that, not actually what it's being exchanged there, because to put something like this in a scale, think about like the banks and financial institutions and other players in the market, like tokenization platforms, etc. Permissionless, blockchains and all this ecosystem. So to have some sort of interoperability around that, it's, I think, the main point. I think privacy is important. It's what it's being tested now, like the central bank is actually running the tests. Even Fabio spoke yesterday about it. But I think interoperability in the future, it will be a big challenge, how to interconnect all this. What are going to be like the standards? Is the central bank like recommending 1, 2, 3 vendors, or it will recommend like a standard? Oh, it's EVM, etc. How can you connect all that? Because like the market is moving, people are already building their own infrastructures, Most of them very similar to the Drex, like trying to follow that path of Hyperledger Bezu, etc. But you have other solutions there. There's something else that is very important. This market evolves faster than others. So something that you're testing now, that you're like evaluating now in 6 months, must be, useless. So I think this technological curve, this attention to the scale, it's from our side, it's actually the most important point to look and to pay attention. Like, let's say that it's over and it's defined, like they issue the report and they set a date, they say, no, we're going to start implementing this in, I don't know, 2025, how this will actually happen in a coordination, movement to get everybody on board, I think that's the biggest challenge, to understand now, like the pilot works for this kind of insights, to understand actually, okay, when we need to, connect 1,000, 2,000, institutions here, when we have use case like cross-border, payments, you need to be interconnected with other central banks and all this. So the thing is a little bit more complex than what is happening on the ground, and so basically it's that. I think the biggest learning is to think about how the interoperability and all this, this thing will get actually big scale.
And so the way I've come to think about Drex is almost as kind of like a hybrid wholesale/retail CBDC model, where in CBDC jargon, I guess, if you want to call it that, you kind of have a retail CBDC model where like every individual person would have like an account directly with the central bank, and the central bank would basically just like airdrop money into your personal account. And I think this was kind of the original idea that people were pursuing with CBDCs, but there's not really an easy way to do this without just disintermediating completely the financial system and banks, which are obviously very powerful stakeholders, and they probably wouldn't like that very much, right? So the wholesale model was proposed as basically more of like an efficiency game. Okay, we have the central bank, and we have a variety of financial institutions that operate within this controlled network that the central bank operates. And the wholesale CBDC will basically just be used kind of as an internal settlement mechanism, right? What the Drex is proposing to do, which is I find most interesting about it, is like it's kind of combining both of these ideas. And I would love for like one of you guys who's more knowledgeable of this than I am to maybe explain like how exactly that works. Like, so you have like the financial institutions that are using the wholesale Drex on the kind of the settlement side, but then also the retail, like the customers of the banks will also be using like, the real tokenizado, like the tokenized reais as well, which will be kind of, they won't be like the Drex tokens, but they'll basically be paired one-to-one.
It's like a stable coin. It's like that, their stable coin.
Right.
So if you look at the crypto market, okay, let's talk about permissionless blockchains, okay? All this already works. You have all the use case you want to try. You have stable coins, you have interoperability, you have privacy, you have all this. But then when you need to bring all this thing that already works in a like more, I wouldn't say free, but a permissionless like environment where anyone just downloading a wallet and can connect and open an account in an exchange or whatever, can use, transfer funds from one country to the other, make payments, tokenize invoices, whatever, financial products, So then you need to think how you bring all this that is already built, okay? This exists in an environment that requires some sort of like control, but like in a good sense. So I make a joke that everybody's a narco-capitalist until they lose the private key, So it's pretty much like this. So how do you bring all this setup that already works? Okay, stable coins are there, Bitcoin's there, multiple blockchain environments talking to each other, bridges, swap platforms, how you bring this to a controlled environment, to a like to add some sort of like governance and compliance on top of that. I think that's the thing, It's like nobody's inventing anything new inside there. Like this, let's make it clear. Okay, it's really the big thing is actually how can we get that thing that nobody controls. You know, no, it's sometimes even difficult, hard to organize or to get like mass adoption because of the user experience, etc. Like when I started crypto, and I think you guys too, you know, it was really a no man's land. So now it's actually nice. It's actually easy, you know. But it's how can we bring this to an organized place where like parts will actually, you know, put some level of governance, compliance, you know, some legal aspects, regulatory, etc. I think that's the main point, you know.
Great. And Casta, feel free to weigh in on that if you want, that question about just kind of the dual level. But then also I wanted to add in, I think the kind of the killer function or killer application of how, at least of how Drex is being marketed, is the fact that it's being built on Hyperledger Bazoo, which is a permissioned blockchain platform that is Ethereum virtual machine compatible. So to your point, Leandro, about how we have all of these, you know, DeFi applications and crypto applications and lending pools and decentralized exchanges and you know, swap functions, all these things existing kind of out in the wild. But now with an Ethereum virtual machine compatible platform that's being effectively sanctioned and overseen by a central bank, there's an element of like, I guess, legitimacy, you know, that comes with that. And I think right now we're in a position, especially with like the news that the SEC is probably going to be suing Uniswap in the US. I think we're at a position where like the future of I guess we'll call it like unregulated DeFi, you know, it seems a bit up in the air, like how broadly usable will this stuff end up being ultimately. And I guess if there are, you know, if these things become more difficult to access, these developers, these protocols are going to need a place to be able to run their smart contracts. And an environment like Drex is kind of like the ideal place for that because it's already EVM compatible. So Casta, would love for you to like just riff on all that for a little bit.
Yes, that's a lot of context.
Yeah, a lot of context,
yes.
but yeah, go ahead.
Let's start with the Uniswap versus SEC issue. Like Uniswap, which is a decentralized exchange in the Ethereum ecosystem, has received a Wells notice. It will probably be sued by the SEC. And you say, wow, so Drex is researching on the same technology that empowers Uniswap, but Uniswap is being sued by the regulators of North America. But Uniswap is not being sued by its infrastructure. It is being sued by its end application, by what it does. And what it does is that it's trying to build security aspects on its own token. So that's like to stir up the hive of regulators. So when we talk about, I don't see that there is any conflict between several users of Ethereum that you can have on the decentralized world and our central bank researching Ethereum. What we are doing in our central bank is that we are researching if this technology that has been developed in the open source world, in the decentralized world, is a good foundation to enforce a national currency that abides by the rule of law, that is by its nature centralized, regulated. It is able to, our government can censor accounts, it can like lock money up. So perhaps we will find some difficulties along the way because this technology was not devised to implement such restrictions. And we are researching, can we get like this ultra permissionless, decentralized, validated, and bring it here inside our house and make it turn into a national currency? So perhaps it won't work. Being really honest with you, it is not that if it doesn't work that we are not going to have Drex. Our central bank has not settled on Hyperledger Bezo. It has not settled on Ethereum technology. What we have now is an experimentation. And there are, guys, layers and layers of who knows what is happening, really. So what I can tell you, guys, without compromising myself, is that it is really not settled on Ethereum. We are going to see there is openness for more experimentation. If you work with Hyperledger Bezo, you have several challenges. First, you cannot do a retail CBDC on Hyperledger Bezo. You have like few validators. If you have few validators, it scales faster. You are able to process more transactions. But Hyperledger Bezo will not be able to scale to millions of transactions. It will not be able to do what Pix does today. So we have scalability issues, and we have privacy issues. Ethereum is an open ledger. Everyone can see everyone's account, everyone's balances, everyone's transfers. So you wonder if banks want each other to see what they are doing with their money, how they are transferring, what the quantities, the amount. So we need privacy, we need scalability. We have like issues with the LGPD, which is our privacy laws borrowed from the Europe laws. One of the laws that we have in Brazil regarding computational system and services is the right to be forgotten. You have the right to be forgotten by any digital service in this country. But if this service is provided in a blockchain that is immutable, it is uncensorable, we cannot give you the right to be forgotten. How can we conciliate those matters? So in my point of view, what we see today in the Drex pilot is just the start. There are other challenges as well. The most talented minds at the central bank are being hired by the private market. Because the guys at central bank, and we have to take our hats off for them, they really understand crypto technology. If you see like a podcast, a YouTube channel, a written article by the guys at the central bank, these guys really understand crypto. And that is good and that is bad, because the private market will offer so much better conditions than a public career. And I can say that because I abandoned my public career to live off the private market. So when you get all of these challenges together, you had like our journalists speculating that we will have Drex by 2004, by 2005. And they're like, oh my God, Drex is coming. And then central bank makes a statement, guys, chill out. There is no deadline. There is no forecasting. We don't have the slightest idea when we are going to have that. We are still experimenting.
Leandro, you want to weigh into that?
No, getting this hook from you, like there's something that I truly believe, and looking how the technology is evolving in both sides, okay, the permissioned and permissionless. I think we're going to get to a point that the ideal scenario is a hybrid environment, okay? You will have the DLTs, okay, the distributed systems between banks, central banks, and other institutions, but they will talk, you know, with the permissionless side. And we already see a movement of lots of public blockchains, let's call like this, with KYC. You know, so we see an improvement on, you know, ZK technologies, on cryptography environments, you know, new projects coming in. And then I come back to that point, you know, everything is evolving too fast. And what it's being done on the regulated side, it's pretty much getting like DeFi, you know, giving some shower, a haircut, putting like a nice suit, and say, now you behave in another way. You know, like, you don't talk too much. But it's part of the game, you know, it's part of, I think, the whole financial institution. Like the idea of blockchain can bring speed, you know, to certain services traditional, you know, finance have now. You know, when I say blockchain, understand DLT, understand, you know, distributed ledger technology, it's fine. But I think that's the main point, you know, to understand where this technology can actually add real benefit, you know, not flowers or paint something that already exists with another color and shape, and then interoperate, you know. I think like this interoperability between the permissioned and the permissionless, that's the key challenge, you know. And if we move fast on that, this will move fast. Regarding Bezo and all these things, I prefer to not like talk about. But again, it's a pilot, you know. And I don't believe people will just like do all the same, you know, copy and paste. You know, it doesn't work like this, but there must be some sort of standard, you know, some sort of like connection points, you know, orchestration between, like, especially settlements, you know, that it's the crazy part of the whole thing. So basically,
Could we maybe take the conversation just back to the privacy question one more time? Because this seems to be like the really big hurdle that they're running into currently. And I know they've been testing a few different solutions, and they haven't really been able to find anything that effectively scales, but also provides the privacy in the manner that this specific system would require the privacy. So like when I first heard that, I was like, well, every time I go to a crypto conference, like 2/3 of the talks are about privacy and ZKs and all these kind of things. And, you know, how all the talks are about preserving privacy and, you know, like how there's so many people in our ecosystem building privacy tools, like, but like, what is like the missing ingredient here? Because it doesn't seem like they've been able to find anything that A, scales to the level they need scales, and B, actually provides privacy in the manner required for the specific architecture.
look, the idea of privacy, especially when you look at the Drex, it's something like he said, you know, like the banks and the financial institutions, there is like a legal component in this, you know. You cannot just show things to everybody. There will be like points of connection, you know, of commit that you can avoid some network operations to access this data, even the central bank, you know. But like I will give an example at Nuclea. We implementing a market network. It's a DLT. We use Bezel in the core, you know, just to do not create too much trouble. And like the edge privacy ledgers that we are building with Parfum, you know, and we are already running some tests. It's pretty much one of the solutions Drex will start to test, you know, the Parfum solution for privacy. And we already doing that. We have already running. We've been testing for a few weeks, and it works fine. You know, it's like there's no big deal on that, you know. It's like discussing privacy with someone posting their daily lives on Instagram, you know, like what is actually privacy to you? You know, I think there are multiple levels of privacy and multiple layers of how to build that, you know. But for sure, it won't be something that it's purely DLT or purely blockchain. You have, you know, Web 2 components in between sometimes, gateways, orchestrators, and all this. You know, you cannot avoid this now. Yeah. Unless you go full public, full permissionless, which I think it won't happen, you know, maybe not in the short term. I think ZK evolving, you know, and making it easier, because ZK, like especially, you know, the ZK networks and all this, there is another big point in the market that not too many people pay attention. There is a shortage of expertise. There is a shortage of people to do these things, you know. So there's a lot of people learning, but we still have like a shortage of developers, architects, you know, that understand how to build actually, you know, a proper network, considering like all this scalability, interoperability, privacy aspects, you know. And at the end of the day, it's all tech, you know, it's all technical.
So I'm going to ask one more question here, and I'm going to open it up for some questions from the audience. So if you have one, keep it in the back of your mind, and we'll get to you. But I'd like to maybe reframe here and just think about, let's just assume that this is going to work, right? Like this Drex model that they're proposing is going to work.
I hope so.
Let's assume it works. Let's, you know, all these challenges we're talking about have been solved. It's going to work. How is this going to impact like the end consumer? Like, is this one of these things where it's just, you know, the end consumer doesn't know there's even a blockchain involved, and it's just a better product? Or is there going to be some required consumer behavioral changes here? And then perhaps even more importantly, how does this impact like the business model of the banks? Like what is the impact on the banks who are essentially the ones who are going to be almost like the nodes in this network who will be interfacing directly with the customers. How does this impact their business model?
There are multiple sides. For example, when you tokenize an asset, there are asset classes that you cannot break it into parts. So one of the biggest, benefits of tokenization is that you can break an asset into small parts, and you can distribute and reach a much broader market that sometimes today is not able to, to access these products. The other thing is actually time to market for some, products. Let's give an example. I don't know who has a company here, but try to get a loan in the bank. It's a nightmare, you fill a lot of papers, you need to wait, stamps and the hell. And if everything is tokenized and you have all this visibility, on chain, it's much easier to collateralize assets, to collateralize guarantees, to, give money, sell money, which is the bank business. So you get speed, you get, you reduce the traction, it's, there are many benefits, but of course there are also risks, like this LGPD, this privacy, not only here. So you need to understand what actually can be on the blockchain, what needs to be off chain. Today, this is a real challenge, when you tokenize an asset, what kind of information you can actually put on the blockchain or on the DLT, what you cannot put it. So is this so fully tokenized, or the tokens just a receipt, an indication that something, is still on Web 2, on, legacy systems, exists, so I think we still have a long journey to understand how this will, composability is a problem, how can you sort actually the composability of all these products and technologies together, There are, man, we can talk for 8 hours about this, it's like a live for Casta,
Well, Casta, I'd love your thoughts on how does this ultimately impact the end consumers in the Brazilian market, as well as the banking kind of traditional finance business models?
Okay. When we talk about bulk or settlement CBDCs, and we talk about retail CBDCs in crypto fashion, we are talking about the tokenization of the relation between central bank and banks, and the tokenization of the relation of retail banks, retail economy, and users. If we talk about the tokenization in bulk or settlement, we are talking about reframing the backbone of the economical setup. So the benefits will be trustworthier relations between banks themselves, between banks and central banks, and overall trustworthier economy for everyone, if you say so. But I think the impacts, they start to get more interesting and perhaps more spicy if we talk about retail CBDC. Because one thing that retail CBDC enables is that you can have an account, like a credit card, a debit card, and it is custodied right in the blockchain. So it's like an end user account provided by the central bank. So you would not need Banco do Brasil, you would not need Itaú. That is possible, but that is not interesting. Because as we evolve it, from gold standard, from currency, notes standards, we need the retail banks to operate the retail economy. And what happens if we devise a technology that turns that something unnecessary? So we have technological aspects, and we have political aspects, and we have economical aspects of this impact. Some things, even though they are technologically possible or feasible, not necessarily will be implemented. Perhaps, even though the central bank could provide end-user accounts and end-user credit cards or something like that, it will choose not to do so, because this would hurt other big players that have a great interest and a great power within our economy. So what we have at stake is not only a technological evolution, it's a new arrangement of socio-economical interests. And that is all. I can tell you how it's going to evolve. But I can tell you is that we have many facets that are open to discussion, and we will get a better grasp of them as the pilot evolves.
All right, open it up for questions here if anybody has over here. And just please introduce yourself.
So, hi everyone, my name is Davi. I work as a financial advisor and investment consultant. And I wanted to ask you guys, Rafael gave the example of the company that was sued by the SEC. And one thing we know that the crypto and tokenization and the blockchain allows is to don't have any intermediaries of those transactions. And what's your opinion about having such an environment of like a blockchain company that can make investments possible from like without having any banks or any intermediaries? Will that be possible in the future? I know it will be possible, but in your opinion, it will be you can have scale with that, or we still gonna need the regulators to allow that to happen?
Interesting question. I'll give you an oversight. Let's think about something, right? If you go back some years in Brazil, here in Brazil, like 15, 20 years, or perhaps a little bit before the year 2000, 80s and 90s, we did not have broadband access to internet. So our main media was journal, press in journal, or television. And we have, up to today, in Brazil, electoral time. There is a time in which all the television stops their content and they broadcast political propaganda because there is a law from the government that mandates that open-air television should broadcast political propaganda. Bring it up to today. Most of the new generation doesn't even watch open television anymore. They watch YouTube and Netflix and Disney Plus and something like that. And our government doesn't have any power whatsoever to come to these big tech companies and say, oh, at 6 p.m. in Brazil, get all the IPs from Brazil, stop playing Disney Plus and princesses and start broadcasting political propaganda. So what is truly happening, Davi, is a shift in the world order. A shift in the established power between the pillars of the modern society, which you could say, which are those three pillars: banks, governments, and since the rise of the internet, big tech corporation. So we are talking about crypto bringing and leveling up the game within the balanced power between these three structures. One could say, and lots of people said that in Brazil during the beginning of 2000, oh, but our big media, global, is never let internet grow in Brazil. Now, government is going to censor the internet, and they may want to do so. But the thing is, if technology is good enough, it is impossible. You just cannot do it. And you have then to adapt to technology. So nowadays, what do our politicians do? They have Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, YouTube accounts. And as they want votes, they want likes, they want comments, so they subject themselves to the algorithm. So the political class nowadays is obedient to another entity, which are the algorithms of the big tech corporations. That is a massive shift in power relations that we rarely talk about. And we talk about crypto and SEC versus Uni, come back to the beginning of our question. Oh my God, SEC is going to destroy Uni. Will it? Because crypto technology is devised to resist such advancements. It is programmed in its nature to resist. And what we will see in the near future, and it is inevitable, it's a clash. Regulators will try to regulate. Those that are resistant will try to resist. And we will see what fares better in the end. I can tell you my personal opinion, but we'll let the time flow and see for ourselves.
I'll ask you later, like, off the records.
Any other questions? We'll go right here and then over to you.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lace. You said a lot about interoperability. About all these technologies. Have you heard about the FinTech Open Source Foundation, the Finos project?
No.
Like, it's a community like the CNCF or any other, like the Linux Foundation. They got together. I think that JP Morgan and other bigger banks are behind that. They are creating technologies that like every bank needs to do the same thing. So let's make this open source so everyone
It's
can
like
share.
a get together, yeah.
Yeah, it's a get together, but for
there
fintech.
are many initiatives like this, you know. But when we talk about like interoperability here, I think it's more on the low level, on the technical side, you know.
Okay.
How can you actually interoperate without the get-togethers, you know? So I think the idea is actually you use like a technology, he use another one, I use another one, and how can we actually talk to each other and actually form groups? Because if you start forming groups, then this is not interoperability, you know, it's the get-together. So I think that the point of interoperability is to reach a point that it's like internet, like TCP/IP, you know. So you can use different routers, you can use different servers, you can use whatever, but everybody talks TCP/IP, you know. There are some nice initiatives, some nice projects, you know, like Chainlink, CCIP, that try to, you know, push some boundaries on this kind of like topic. You have some, you know, in-between solutions that works like a bridge. There is a lot being done, okay? So the point is actually how, I think my main point when I said about like the interoperability is the big challenge, how you get all this, the get-togethers, the protocols, you know, the services, the independent initiatives, open source, but you reach like a common sense on how we really talk to each other, you know?
Yeah, you need to build some RFCs.
Yeah, or you know, some sort of component that nobody have imagined yet. You know, that's the nice thing of like blockchain and you know the decentralized way of thinking is new things are coming all the time. You know, a lot of people are building things, you know, especially now on the bear market in crypto. We really got like a filter, you know, like a lot of people doing like nothing relevant has appeared, and really the ones like pushing to build good stuff, you know, are evolving, you know, are getting into the decentralized market, the DeFi to CeFi, interoperability, privacy solutions, you know.
Like, if you are on these like new markets that doesn't have like any regulations, but on the development side, does it mean that these like innovations pushed by the central bank puts Brazil in a huge place, like to make the rules for it, like defining these protocols and making everyone following it?
Yeah, we end up like pushing some standards, you know, at least helping to push standards, you know. There's nothing written in a rock now, you know. So I think everything it's open to discuss and to, again, like Drex, it's a pilot, you know. Maybe in 1 year or two, the central bank can come and say, hey, all this we've done, it's useless. Let's try something else, you know. So I think that there's a lot of space to innovate, you know. But again, all this already exists, guys, you know. Like you look to the crypto, you know, the permissionless side, it's all there. The stable coins are there. When we talk about retail CBDC, it's the bank stable coin, you know. So when we talk about tokenization, it's in crypto already, you know, like for years, you know. So it's how can you bring all this that it's not, let's not say respecting, but not following like a legal framework or compliance framework needed for this market, you know. This is not wrong. To adapt, you know, into this controlled or organized, let's say organized thing, you know, market. It's part of the game, you know. That's why I believe the hybrid is like at certain stage, especially for scalability. You know, I don't know how many of you guys are building like DLTs, but the cost is crazy, you know. So when you get scale, like Amazon, you need to consider all this. You know, you don't have any financial incentives from the blockchain to run a node. You need to pay that shit, you know, and it's expensive. And it grows and it gets more expensive. And the market today doesn't have the volume to justify this. So the ones building like us, like other, you know, financial institutions, we're really taking the risk and investment for the long run. It's not for now, you know, like, again, to help to set standards and help to, you know, understand where it's going. But definitely the hybrid is I think a better scenario for a near future, you know.
And then I'll chime in and just say one of my sort of guiding theses when I look at the Drex project is really comparing. You have to kind of look at Drex in the context of the central bank's entire innovation agenda, which I think, you know, by and large has been quite successful. Most people would agree with that assessment, like PIX, some of the open finance initiatives, and then the Drex is kind of the, you know, the cherry on top essentially. And when you see the uptake that, I mean, PIX is, I mean, saying this as a gringo who's lived in Brazil for a little while, like PIX is the most successful like fintech application like on the planet. I mean, it's been around for like 2-3 years, and it's already basically reached the entire population in Brazil. Like everybody's using it. It's incredible. So what the central bank has achieved with this is remarkable, and I think you're seeing other nations coming and basically trying to replicate what the central bank has done with PIX. So you have Colombia that's kind of rolling out. I think some of the other Latin American nations are looking at this. And I think with this Drex model, if it does work, because the model is so innovative in itself, compared to some of the other CBDC projects that are being researched around the world and developed, and then also the fact that the central bank does have this track record of delivering on these things, I think this could be a model that gets copied and pasted and replicated in other countries, right? That's not necessarily like a prediction. I'm just saying that it's certainly plausible. I guess any other? I think you had a question over here.
Just a quick comment. Like, it's,
yeah, right.
we're in a moment that everything in the PDF works just fine, you know. So you have a lot of reports, a lot of people researching, and all this. But we really have not too many people in institutions building. You know, it's very important when you like try to get some sense of how things are being done. Try to look where this PDF reflects to something that it's being built, you know, or as a pilot, or as a production project, or, you know, because we living in a moment of the market, because like tokenization, blockchain, crypto, and all this thing, it's like a buzzword, you know, like a lot of people move into AI now. so there's a lot of like solutions being brought to, you know, to this space, to the market, that they not being like tested, evaluated, you know, it's a scientific method, man. You need to, you know, have the theory, and then you take to the lab to test if that thing really works, or it can work. Otherwise, it's just a theory. So just watch about like these theories in this market. There's a lot of people building crazy theories, products, and all these things. And the reality is blockchain tokenization for the financial systems to bring like speed, you know, agility, to make the end user experience better, faster, you know, to sell money faster, and that's it, you know, and that's fine. You know, we all need it.
Question over here. Excuse me, can we get a mic to this gentleman here in the second row?
Hi, everyone. I'm Murilo. I work as a lawyer for a national bank here in Brazil. I'm not going to talk about regulation. I think we are not there yet. But first of all, thanks for the presentation. It was great. Rafael, I've meaning to ask you, a lot of people in Brazil don't have access to financial services. Do you think Drex can help change that, help change financial inclusion?
Yes, that is one of the arguments about CBDC as a whole. If you can like provide services directly to the population perhaps our central bank could issue accounts for people where retail banks are not interested. Because there are regions of Brazil which you have no economical incentives to adopt, to provide services to. Perhaps it is too poor, it has not many commerce, not industry, and then if you are a retailer, if you are a for-profit company, you will like rather do your activities where you can extract value. And that left less provided or less favorable communities unbanked. And so if you think as a system provided in local, like native, the currency itself is accountable. You don't need a banking infrastructure for someone to have an account. It may be a simpler account, like you will not have like so many interests and services, and you have like no lending margin, nothing like that, but you'll be part of the economy. So that is really one of the best aspects of such a technology, because it will be like really cheap to provide new accounts, and we could do so without reliance on private sector.
Question right here.
Hi, my name is Viviane. I have a question like more on the, we know that blockchain is like inherently decentralized. So I often question myself, like, why is the central bank like wanting to use this type of technology? Because it's inherently decentralized. So
Right?
Yeah. So that's a good question.
Yes,
like
it is.
when we talk about blockchain, okay, a DLT is not a blockchain, but a blockchain is a DLT. So we need to think on the permissioned and permissionless. To make the topic easier and like for the public, I think, to understand better what is happening, we usually use blockchain to make it simple, you know, but like otherwise we need to really explain like letters and you know, at the end of the day it serves the same purpose, you know, but one has a central, you know, control, it's a central validator, for example, and the other one is permissionless. Anyone can run a node and participate on the economic system of the network, you know. But it's more the way people use the word. It's like at the end of the day, the idea is actually make people to understand. And for the end user, actually, it doesn't matter, you know. It matters when you need, for example, a loan for your company and you open your bank app and it says, oh, you have like an investment here. If you lock this investment, I can get you that amount of money for a less interest. If you don't pay, they just collect. You know, it's all tokens in a smart contract, in a DLT or blockchain, whatever you want to call it. So that's I think the thing, you know. And you reduce intermediaries, you know. You can get like better products with less fees, maybe better interests for, you know, the end user, the consumer.
I can give you two perspectives for your question, okay? The first one is that it is not about decentralization. Because decentralization is not an end on itself. It is a means for something. And usually that end is transparency, efficiency, less corruption, or some benefit. So if there is benefit in procedural or operational decentralization, a centralized entity can use this technology if it wants to obtain the same end results. And if you give economical efficiency, then you will thrive. That is the thing with internet. Internet is fairly decentralized. It is good and bad for the government, as we see it. But it has to be adopted, because if you shut down internet, then your country is going to collapse. You just cannot rely on an organization of society without this decentralized infrastructure. So you are forced to adopt it. And another perspective is that when we think about governments and about the way we work, we tend to think that, oh my God, crypto is decentralized. And the government is like a centralized monster, an evil villain from a movie that's... It is not really like that. Like, we have three established powers. You can argue that is being well done, is not well done, but we have separation of powers, we have a constitution, and there are several aspects of our society that are decentralized. It is not like fine-grained decentralization like crypto, but there are moments where these aspects of decentralization can converge. So wonder, for instance, if we have a central bank digital currency, how are we going to bring trustiness to the central bank digital currency? Perhaps the validators of this currency can reside on all of the three powers and all of the major retail banks. So we have decentralization. It is not like single person decentralization, but is some kind of decentralization. And I think that the answer for your question is that decentralization is rather a spectrum than a black and white decision.
And I would also chime in just to say, kind of on the transparency component that you mentioned. There was recently an interesting survey that came out. I think it was Sherlock Communications, which is a PR firm, put it out a week or two ago. They did a big, extensive survey of people across the Latin American region, asking just like, what are your opinions on, a central bank issued digital currency and yada yada. And I found that the reason I bring this up is because I found it quite interesting, because the views that were expressed in this survey were very different than like the views of people like in the United States or in that people have across the crypto community in general, where people are very rightfully so maybe suspicious of these technologies, like, oh, this is just a surveillance tool and the government's going to use it to control us and whatever, all these things. But the people that responded to this survey actually welcomed the idea of this is going to bring more transparency, right? Because a lot of these countries, obviously, corruption is a very big problem. And, well, how do you fight corruption? Like, well, you can fight corruption with, like, more corruption, perhaps, but, like, the easiest way to fight corruption is with more transparency, right? The sunlight is the best disinfectant, this whole adage. So I think if you're building this type of system out in the way that is decentralized, and it's not just this opaque thing operated in this brutalist tower in Brasilia that's just running everything, but it's operated amongst a consortium of banks and financial institutions around the country, that there's this kind of collective system of trust and transparency that goes into it. That becomes there's maybe residual benefits to this, it's by being something that the population can have more trust in, essentially. So I guess my gringo take on that question, I guess. But maybe like one more question, and then we'll wrap it up here if anybody else has anything.
This is a long debate. There's decentralization. Sometimes it's really bullshit. It's when they're like, go see how many validators Ethereum has concentrated in 60% of the guys, so it's...
I think the guy in the Drex, you got to have a question, man. You're wearing a Drex shirt. Like, you got to have a good question for me. No? Okay. All right. Anyway, Leandro and Casta, I really appreciate your time here. Thanks to the Transfero group for having us here. And
we scared the people.
Yeah, I think we scared, or maybe too much, boring Drex talk, and we scared them away or something. But no, this is a really good conversation. Really enjoyed it. Be sure to scan the QR code up there. If you haven't yet, get your swag from Transfero. So thanks everyone for being here, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.